Layne Staley broke records and inspired a legion of fans, and when his life ended way too soon, a loyal furry friend ensured that he wouldn't be forgotten forever. That story and more as we reveal the untold truth of the late Alice in Chains frontman. He was known throughout his adult life as Layne Thomas Staley, but when he was born in the Seattle suburb of Bellevue, Washington in 1967, his parents named him Layne Rutherford Staley. The seeds of change were planted in the 5th grade when he stopped playing the trumpet that his uncle had loaned to him and discovered that he preferred rock music. As his mother Nancy recalled to Northwest Music Scene in 2017, our family friend Fred loaned him a drum set and he loved the drums. He wasn't really into the trumpet, but the drums he loved. And then our neighbor sold him a drum set and he changed his middle name to Thomas. It was the 1980s at the time, and that decade stable of heavy glam rock bands had fully arrived. And in fact, Thomas was a tribute to one of Staley's favorite hair metal musicians, Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee. The budding musician also readopted the last name of Staley, as his mother had divorced his father and remarried a man named Jim Elmer, so he was known for some time as Layne Elmer. Long before Layne Staley fronted Alice in Chains, one of the first grunge rock bands ever, he sang in a glam metal outfit called Sleaze. That earlier group was formed by a quartet of classmates at Shorewood High School in suburban Seattle in 1984. Staley joined the band as their singer, and he ended up performing covers of some of his favorite acts of the era, including Motley Crue.
Yeah, we're a hair band.
Sleaze's biggest cultural impact probably happened when they appeared in Father Rock, a movie produced for a Seattle Public Access channel in 1986, with Staley and his bandmates sporting appropriately glam hairstyles and rocking out to an enthusiastic crowd. But that same year, Sleaze was already moving in new directions, including a name switch to Alice in Chains. That's N apostrophe as opposed to the word in. Alice in Chains was driven by a creative partnership between two songwriters who were also very close friends, Staley and guitarist Jerry Cantrell. They met at a party in Seattle in 1987 when Cantrell started talking to Staley, who was basically the center of attention. Cantrell's family had recently kicked him out of his house, but his luck was about to turn around as Staley was willing to take him in at a spot called the Music Bank, a dilapidated warehouse that served as a rehearsal space for several area bands as well as a hangout and flophouse. Cantrell was familiar with Staley's work as the singer of Alice in Chains, and he had introduced himself when he saw the band perform in Tacoma in April 1987. They broke up later that year, around the same time that Cantrell's group Diamond Lies split up as well. Soon enough, Staley and Cantrell formed a new band with a reworked version of an old name, Alice in Chains.
Yeah, he's my best friend in the world.
In the late 1980s, the drugs of choice for Layne Staley were alcohol, LSD, marijuana, and cocaine. Heroin wasn't widely used in Seattle at that point. It was offered to Staley around that time, but he adamantly turned it down. He preferred cocaine and continued to take it even after a particularly damaging episode. By 1987, his cocaine habit had become so problematic that his bandmates staged an intervention.
Sometimes you have to draw the line and say no.
Staley managed to remain in relatively good health until 1991. During Alice in Chains' first major tour, when they were opening for Van Halen, Staley became dependent on heroin, which had infiltrated the Seattle music scene and left numerous casualties in its wake. He reportedly first tried the powerful opiates on a whim. When his girlfriend Demry Perot unsuccessfully tried to buy cocaine one evening, she returned with heroin instead. She and Staley then both became addicted, and he raved about it so much that his bandmate Mike Starr became hooked as well. Alice in Chains' sound changed around this time as Staley began to write songs about the despair of addiction. Staley treated his own unique vocal abilities as well as the studio as if they were instruments. While recording Alice in Chains' second album, Dirt, he utilized a strategy that he called stacking vocals. Without outlining his idea to producer Dave Jordan beforehand, he would lay down a vocal track and then repeat. As Jordan recalled to The Atlantic, he would just say, "Give me another track. I want to double it. Now let's triple it." He was telling me what he wanted to do, and we'd do it. After hearing a playback of the lead-off track, Them Bones, Staley improvised and quickly recorded an idea where he'd wail in time to the guitar melody. And on the song Godsmack, it might sound like some studio tricks were used to provide echo, vibration, and volume variation on his vocals, but he actually pulled it off with his voice naturally, and he wouldn't let anyone in the studio see how he did it, instead recording from inside a private enclosure. Alice in Chains' 1991 hit song Man in the Box has generally been interpreted to be about how bad it feels to be stifled, restricted, or held back, common themes in rock music. But it's actually more specifically about the mass media silencing certain unsavory voices, or at least that's what it was initially about when Layne Staley began to assemble the lyrics. As he told Rolling Stone in 1992, "I started writing about censorship. Around the same time, we went for dinner with some Columbia Records people who were vegetarians. The label reps proceed to school Stanley on the procedures used to raise veal, like enclosing cows and stifling fattening pens that are often considered abusive and inhumane. The singer then couldn't get what he'd heard off his mind. As he recalled, "I went home and wrote about government censorship and eating meat as seen through the eyes of a doomed calf."
Plus, I was really stoned when I wrote it, so it meant something different then.
Both of the chief creative voices in Alice in Chains, Layne Staley and Jerry Cantrell, had previously been involved in other musical projects. Cantrell had sung in his school choir, but he didn't feel comfortable singing in Alice in Chains, even on the songs he wrote, until Staley encouraged him to do so. As he recalled to Guitar World in 2009, Layne was really responsible for giving me the confidence to become more of a singer. He'd say, "You wrote this song, this means something to you, sing it." He kicked my ass out of the nest. Staley needed a similar boost to get out of his own wheelhouse. He occasionally played guitar, but not without a lot of prodding. Rage Against the Machine guitarist Tom Morello was particularly inspirational to him. As Cantrell revealed on Morello's podcast, Maximum Firepower, he wanted to play guitar more and he was kind of intimidated because he didn't play that much guitar, but he really was turned on by how you played guitar. And so Staley ended up originating some of Alice in Chains' most memorable guitar melodies, including the riffs for Angry Chair, Hate to Feel, and Head Creeps.
Something you do is kind of hard to listen to and step aside from it and stand back and appreciate it.
Despite numerous physical ailments over the course of his career, Layne Staley rarely missed a show. If a concert was on the schedule, he'd show up and sing no matter how he was feeling. In September 1992, Alice in Chains played the Oklahoma State Fair in Oklahoma City, which offered Staley plenty of space to goof around. Alas, while riding in a recreational vehicle, he managed to drive over his own foot. He ended up with some broken bones, but he refused to cancel or reschedule any of the additional dates left on his band's tour. As he insisted at the time, "I didn't break my neck, so there's no excuse not to play."
Ozzy was watching from his dressing room window when Layne ate it, and he said that's one of the most funniest things he's ever seen in his life.
Staley employed a variety of tools to make things easier while performing injured, including crutches, a wheelchair, and a couch where he could lie down. At one Alice in Chains show in Oakland, California, he even jumped into the audience and crowd surfed, despite his foot being in a cast. Staley's injuries were immortalized by the tour's official t-shirt, which bore the image of an x-ray of his injured foot. If you're not a devoted student of 90s rock music, you might think that Nirvana brought grunge to the mainstream and replaced the popularity of hair metal practically overnight. But that's not exactly how it went down. Instead, the genre emerged gradually thanks in large part to Alice in Chains, which was co-founded by former metalhead Layne Staley. The first album, Facelift, was released in 1990, and by spring of the following year, the hard-edged single Man in the Box was rising up the charts and receiving regular airplay on MTV. Predating Nirvana's rise by about 6 months, Man in the Box was the first hit grunge single. By 1994, grunge had become the coolest kind of rock around. That year, Alice in Chains released Jar of Flies, a half-length record consisting of just 7 songs. It debuted at #1 on Billboard's album charts, the first time that a shorter record known as an EP or extended play pulled off that feat.
Let me tell you something, Alice in Chains are nutty guys.
In 1994, Alice in Chains enjoyed its most commercially successful year ever as Jar of Flies debuted at #1 and generated 3 hit songs, No Excuses, I Stay Away, and Nutshell. But under the weight of all that success, the band was collapsing, albeit briefly and secretly. That summer, Alice in Chains pulled out of a planned tour with Metallica and canceled their appearance at the Woodstock '94 festival. The statement issued at the time vaguely attributed the hiatus to medical issues, but Alice in Chains had actually split up and just hadn't announced it publicly. As guitarist Jerry Cantrell later told Rolling Stone, "We had been way too close for too long and we were suffocating. We were like 4 plants trying to grow in the same pot." The breaking point arrived when Staley finished a stint in a drug rehab clinic and then attended a band practice while intoxicated. Drummer Sean Kinney swore to never collaborate with Staley ever again. Nobody in the band spoke to each other for 6 months, and Staley soon realized how much he missed having Alice in Chains in his life. As he admitted, "At first I was dumbfounded. I just sat on my couch staring at the TV and getting drunk every day." Sometimes celebrities are declared dead when they're still very much alive. Such an unfortunate fate befell Layne Staley in 1994 when Alice in Chains was in the middle of a lengthy break. The group announced that health problems led them to pull out of a tour, and around the same time there were rumors that Staley was privately dealing with a heroin addiction. That all exploded into a notion that he'd been diagnosed with a serious illness or even passed away. As he recalled to Rolling Stone a couple of years later, "I found out through the internet that I have AIDS. I learned I was dead. Where else would I find out these things? I was in San Francisco at Lollapalooza and this girl walked up to me and stopped like she'd seen a ghost. And she said, 'You're not dead.' And I said, 'No, you're right. Wow.'"
The nature of the beast is always present at these shows, which is cool.
But the rumors were understandable. In the late 90s, Staley stepped away from the public eye while nursing a serious drug addiction. The majority of his teeth fell out, and the use of IVs left his arms riddled with abscesses. This all led to another legend about Staley, that his arm had become so infected with gangrene that it had to be amputated. By the mid-90s, Staley's mental health had deteriorated to the point that he considered suicide. After surviving a few attempts at ending his own life, he was pulled out of that despair by a fear of the unknown, as well as some profound, unexplainable experiences. As he admitted to Rolling Stone in 1996, "I'm scared of death, especially death by my own hand. I'm scared of where I would go." Staley claimed that he saw the afterlife and that it looked bleak and painful for someone like himself. As he put it, "I was lucky enough to get a glimpse of where I was going to go if I did follow through with it. It makes me sad for my friends who have taken their lives, because I know that if your time is not finished here and you end it yourself, then you gotta finish it somewhere else." On one occasion, Staley blacked out and felt himself being transported to a horrible place. As he recalled, "I had no control over my muscles and it scared the out of me because I experienced what I guess could have been hell or, purgatory or whatever. It was freezing cold and I was spinning like I was drunk and trying desperately to take a breath." Layne Staley never really had a career as a solo act, though he occasionally branched out from his main gig. He saved the vast majority of his creative efforts for Alice in Chains, though he took advantage of their hiatuses to collaborate with other musicians. In fact, he teamed up with other famous rock stars to form a couple of supergroups. Their outputs weren't very prolific, but they were memorable. In 1994, Pearl Jam guitarist Mike McCready met bassist John Baker Saunders at a Minnesota drug rehab center, and they asked Screaming Trees drummer Barrett Martin if he wanted to join his side project. McCready then brought in his friend Layne Staley to be the singer, and they played a few gigs as the Gacy Bunch after serial killer John Wayne Gacy. They eventually settled on the name Mad Season, and in 1995 they released their only album, Above, which featured the hit songs River of Deceit and I Don't Know Anything.
It's a tough record to hear sometimes because it's Layne kind of chronicling where he's going.
4 years later, Staley led another alt-rock supergroup called Class of '99, which came together to cover Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 for the soundtrack of the sci-fi horror movie The Faculty. With Staley on vocals, the band also included Rage Against the Machine guitarist Tom Morello, Jane's Addiction drummer Stephen Perkins, Porno for Pyro's bassist Martin Lenoble, and Collective Soul bassist Matt Serletic. In the early and mid-90s, Layne Staley dated Demry Perot, a model from the Seattle area. Like Staley, she struggled with substance abuse, which took a tragic turn in October 1996 when she had a fatal case of bacterial endocarditis. She was only 27. Staley understandably didn't handle it very well, to put it mildly. As his friend Screaming Trees frontman Mark Lanigan told Rolling Stone in 2002, he never recovered from Demry's death. After that, I don't think he wanted to go out. After Perot's death, Staley didn't leave his home or communicate with friends or family very often, preferring to stay in and play video games, while also taking heroin and cocaine. The last person to see Layne Staley alive was Alice in Chains bassist Mike Starr during the latter's birthday on April 4, 2002. He visited Staley's home that day and they hung out and watched TV. They came across the show Crossing Over with John Edward, on which Edward, a self-proclaimed psychic, helped guests reach out to their deceased relatives. Staley told Starr that he had had a similar experience, as he insisted, "Demry was here last night. I don't give a if you believe me or not, dude. I'm telling you, Demry was here last night." It wasn't long after that Staley would be gone himself. In the late 90s, Staley's physical health was declining due to years of heroin use, though he still managed to show up for his final performances with Alice in Chains in 1996, but it didn't exactly go very well. Instead of putting together a full-fledged tour or promoting their self-titled 1995 album, the band played stripped-down, mostly acoustic versions of their songs on an episode of MTV Unplugged. Most fans and reviews actually praised the performance, but Staley struggled to get through it. As Jerry Cantrell recalled during a concert in 2018, "Funny story, we did the Unplugged in New York and Layne kept up Sludge Factory. We did it like 8 times. He blew the same thing in the second verse." Staley also messed up again in the take that was used on the show, as he can be heard dropping an F-bomb at the troublesome parts of Sludge Factory.
We're allowed a couple of those. It's been a while.
Alice in Chains wasn't planning on hitting the road at that point, but then Stone Temple Pilots dropped out of their slots as the opening act for Kiss, after their frontman Scott Weiland went into rehab, and so Alice in Chains signed on for their first full concerts in 3 years. They played in Detroit, Louisville, and Kansas City without incident, but after the third show, Staley overdosed and had to go to the hospital to recover. His band had to abandon the tour, and they never played live with him again. After opening for Kiss in June 1996, Alice in Chains went on an extended break. They didn't reconvene for more than 2 years, when they went into a Los Angeles studio in August 1998 to record 2 new tracks for a career-spanning box set. But Layne Staley's behavior turned that relatively simple plan into something monumentally difficult. When it came time to finish adding vocals to the nearly completed songs, Staley bailed, claiming that he needed to return home to Seattle to go to his sister's wedding. Relations had already grown strained between Staley and Jerry Cantrell after the singer kept altering a melody and some lyrics written by Cantrell. At one point, Staley reportedly denied having Lane ever sung his bandmates' words, a patently false claim. Sessions were rescheduled, but it was obvious to his bandmates and the production staff that Staley was deep in the throes of drug addiction. As producer Dave Jordan recalled to Rolling Stone, he had lost a lot of weight and he looked white as a ghost. However, the songs that Staley contributed to, Died and Get Born Again, did make their way onto the compilation, but they would be the last material he would ever record with his band. Rock stars and tattoos often go hand in hand, and Layne Staley is certainly one of the most notable examples of that connection. Just after he turned 21 in 1988, he went out drinking in Seattle with Jerry Cantrell. They commemorated the night and their friendship with some matching ink, with skulls on Staley's left arm and Cantrell's right arm. While Cantrell's skull features bulging eyes and an exploding brain, Staley's was a bit friendlier, sporting sunglasses and an Elvis Presley-style hairdo. Cantrell later referenced their tattoos on the song Sea of Sorrow, which he wrote for Alice in Chains' 1990 debut album Facelift. It contained the lyric, "You opened fire, aim my smiling skull at you." Staley eventually went back under the needle for another tattoo in the form of a striking image of a Christ-like figure with his eyes sewn shut on his back. It strongly resembles a character featured at the end of the music video for Alice in Chains' first big hit, Man in the Box.
It's the best.
During his stint as Alice in Chains' frontman, Staley generated and acquired a lot of unique and priceless memorabilia, but where it all ended up now is a mystery. In the late 90s, Staley gifted a stack of his handwritten lyric sheets and original artwork to his friend, Seattle musician Ron Holt. Holt later claimed that he lost these items, which were estimated to be worth something in the four-figure range. But then, in 2016, he attempted to sell on eBay a tape of himself and Staley playing in a band called 40 Years of Hate. According to Alice in Chains, the Untold story author David DeSola, when Staley's family was sorting through the musician's personal effects following his death, they found that his storage units had been burglarized. Many items disappeared forever, though his estate did manage to purchase back other items from people who claimed without proof that Staley meant to give them those items. The Linwood, Washington Police Department did manage to recover Staley's MTV Video Music Award the day that his death was announced. For more than a decade, the most notable missing items from his collection were his personal journals. In 2025, Simon & Schuster announced that those papers would be published, although they didn't reveal how they had acquired those materials. On April 19, 2002, the accounting team that worked for Layne Staley noticed that he hadn't taken any money out of his account for about 2 weeks, so they contacted his mother Nancy, who also hadn't been in touch with her son for a similar amount of time. She then embarked on a wellness check at his home in Seattle with some police officers in tow. After not hearing any response from Staley, they forcibly entered and made a tragic discovery: a decomposed body sitting on a couch. Staley's remains were resting alongside drug paraphernalia, such as pipes and syringes, including one that was loaded with heroin in his hand. Although it was Staley's house, the identity of the body couldn't be immediately determined. It took an autopsy to ultimately confirm that it was in fact Staley. His weight had dropped to 86 pounds, and the cause of death was determined to be an overdose of heroin and cocaine. He was only 34 years old.
I love this terribly.
Layne Staley never got married, although he was engaged once. Despite that lack of a spouse, he did enjoy the company of a constant companion in the final years of his life in the form of a cat named Sadie. She started living with the musician in the mid-90s until his death in 2002. And it was actually Sadie's odd behavior that made Staley's mother Nancy realize something was wrong. When Nancy stood outside her son's home on April 19, 2002, she noticed Sadie's uncharacteristic meowing, which convinced her that she needed to call the authorities for help getting into the condo. After Staley died, Sadie needed a new caretaker, and she found one in her previous owner's former bandmate, Jerry Cantrell. He took Sadie to his Oklahoma ranch, and she even appeared on Cantrell's episode of MTV Cribs later that year. She died in 2010 at the age of 18.
She's a pretty good cat.
Layne Staley and the music he made with Alice in Chains meant a lot to a lot of people. After his death in 2002, tributes started pouring in from his colleagues and admirers. Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins wrote in a statement, "Layne had an amazing voice that had such a beautiful, sad, haunting quality about it. He was different because his heaviness was in that voice." And Soli Erna of Godsmack admitted, "He was single-handedly the guy that got me to start singing. To this day, I've never really heard a cooler singer." Eddie Vedder wrote the Pearl Jam song 42002 for his late friend, while Stained and Black Label Society both recorded songs called Layne. Plus, James Hetfield has revealed that parts of Metallica's 2008 album Death Magnetic was inspired by Staley. 17 years after his death, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin declared August 22, 2019 Layne Staley Day, as that would have been his 52nd birthday. The event included a memorial meeting at the city's International Foundation and a performance by an Alice in Chains cover band.